Stop crying. Pack your bags and get out before everyone leaves. My daughter-in-law said those words 6 feet from my son's casket. For a moment I thought grief had rearranged the sentence before it reached me. The sanctuary smelled of lilies, damp wool, and the coffee volunteers had started in the fellowship hall. Daniel's photograph stood on an easel beside the pulpit, the one Grace had chosen because he was laughing in it. In the picture, my son was 42, sunburned from repairing the roof of Lantern House, with a pencil tucked over one ear. In the casket, he was 47, and still in a way no father should ever have to see. Vanessa stood beside me in a black dress that looked as if it had never wrinkled. Her eyes were dry. I did not hold that against her. People grieve in different ways, and I had been alive long enough to know that tears were not a measure of love. It was the small blue folder pressed against her ribs that caught my attention. She had carried it through the service, through the prayers, and through the line of people who told us Daniel had been a good man. "What did you say?" I asked. She leaned closer, though half the front pew could already hear us. "The building closes next Friday. I need your apartment empty tonight. You can take the clothes and whatever is clearly yours. We'll sort the furniture later." Behind her, Grace stopped speaking to her guidance counselor and looked toward us. My granddaughter was 17. In 8 days, she had watched her father collapse in the bookstore office, ride away in an ambulance, remain unconscious in an intensive care unit, and die without opening his eyes again. That morning, she had read a poem at his funeral, with both hands gripping the lectern so tightly her knuckles lost their color. I would not add a public fight to what she was already carrying. "This is not the place," I said. "It is the only place where you can't pretend you didn't hear me." Vanessa's voice remained controlled. That made it more painful, not less. "Daniel is gone. The property was his. I'm the executor and his wife. Blackridge has already bought it. You've lived upstairs without paying rent for 9 years. That arrangement ended when he died. Lantern House was ours. It was Daniel's future. You had your chance with it." The minister glanced over from the aisle. Vanessa gave him a small, apologetic smile, the expression people use when an elderly relative has become confused in public. Then she looked back at me. "Please don't make me have the locks changed while the church is still full." I had taught English at Haywood County High School for 31 years. I had broken up fights, notified parents after accidents, and stood in front of teenagers who believed volume could turn an excuse into a fact. The habit that stayed with me after retirement was simple. When someone wanted me angry, I became more precise. "Are you asking me to leave my apartment tonight?" "I am telling you." "And you say the building has been sold?" "Yes." "Did Daniel sign that sale?" Her fingers tightened around the folder. Daniel handled what needed to be handled. It was not an answer. I noticed because for most of my life, noticing what people avoided had been part of my work. "I will speak to you after Grace has gone home," I said. Vanessa stepped in front of me as I tried to move toward the pew. "No. You will go upstairs, pack, and leave your keys on the office desk. My brother is bringing boxes." Grace was watching now. So were Ruth Alvarez and 3 former teachers from my school. I could feel the room holding its breath, hungry and ashamed of the hunger. I looked at the casket. Daniel had been my only child. His mother, Eleanor, died 11 years before him, and for one terrible instant I imagined having to tell her that I had outlived our boy. My hand rested on the polished wood. It was cool beneath my palm. "I will not discuss a property closing over my son's body," I said. "If you change the locks, keep the old cylinder. It belongs to the company." Vanessa stared at me, perhaps waiting for the anger she had prepared to describe later. I kissed 2 fingers and pressed them to the casket. Then I walked toward Grace. She met me halfway. "Grandpa, what's happening?" "Your mother and I disagree about the building. She said you're moving to Aunt Paula's." I had no sister named Paula. Vanessa had an aunt by that name in Tennessee whom I had met once at a wedding. "Nothing has been decided," I said. Grace searched my face. "Did Dad want you to move?" The honest answer was that I did not know what Daniel had wanted during the last 2 weeks of his life. Our final conversation had been an argument, something I had not told Grace and could barely admit to myself. He had asked me to sign papers for what he called a preliminary review of a sale. I told him Lantern House was not ready to be sold. He said I was confusing memory with management. I accused him of letting Vanessa turn our family into a staging project. He left my apartment without finishing his coffee. 3 days later, he collapsed beside the store's history table. "Your father and I were still talking," I told her. Grace nodded as if that answer hurt but made sense. "Don't leave without telling me." "I won't." Vanessa called her name from the front of the church. Grace flinched. Then she hugged me, hard and quickly, before returning to her mother. Ruth waited near the fellowship hall doors. She had worked at Lantern House for 16 years, first as our accountant, later as the person who could balance payroll, calm an angry author, and tell a bride that 12 extra tables would not fit upstairs no matter what the internet promised. Her gray hair was cut close around her face, and her black coat still carried drops from the morning rain. "Did she tell you?" Ruth asked. "That depends on what you mean." "The closing. She told me a version." Ruth's mouth tightened. "I did not issue the estoppel certificate. I refused. An estoppel certificate was something our commercial tenants signed to confirm their leases, rent, and deposits before a property sale. I knew that much from the refinancing we completed 6 years earlier." "Who asked you?" "A woman from Blackridge, then Vanessa, then a lawyer I don't know." Ruth looked past me toward the sanctuary. "Joe, the contract says unanimous member approval is attached." "I never approved it." "I know." "Daniel?" Ruth hesitated. "I have only seen the signature page. His consent is dated last Friday." Last Friday, Daniel had been in the neurological intensive care unit at Mission Hospital. A ventilator had been breathing for him. The doctors had already told us that the swelling in his brain was catastrophic. "That date cannot be right," I said. "Your signature is underneath his." The noise from the fellowship hall faded until all I could hear was the rain tapping the church windows. "I did not sign anything on Friday." "I know that too." Ruth reached into her handbag and handed me a folded piece of paper. It was not the consent. It was an email Daniel had sent her the morning before he collapsed. "Ruth, do not release tenant records or confirm vacancy. Dad has not approved a sale. Hold every Northline invoice and back up the March ledger. I'll explain after I talk to Vanessa." Below the message was the time. 8:14 a.m. Daniel collapsed at 11:37. I read it twice. "Why didn't you show me this at the hospital?" "Because his wife was sitting beside you, Grace was sleeping in a plastic chair, and you were waiting for a doctor to say your son might wake up. I did not know what Northline meant yet." "Do you now?" "Not completely, but I know it received $96,000 2 days before Daniel collapsed." Ruth closed my fingers over the paper. "Do not go into the office alone. Do not sign anything. And take photographs before you move a single box." "I am not moving." "Then take photographs of the locks." At 74, I should have understood that a home can disappear before you leave it. It happens first in other people's language. Your apartment becomes the upstairs space. Your furniture becomes contents. Your key becomes access that can be revoked. By the time a suitcase appears, someone has already edited you out of the sentence. Lantern House stood 3 blocks from the church on a corner where Main Street bent toward the old courthouse. It was a 3-story brick building with tall arched windows and a copper lantern above the front door. Eleanor and I first saw it in 1988 when it was a boarded furniture store with pigeons in the attic and rainwater running down the back stairs. We bought it for $142,000, using every dollar we had saved, and a loan my father said would ruin us. The ground floor became a bookstore. The second became an events room and 2 small offices. The third floor remained storage until Eleanor became ill. After her first surgery, Daniel and I converted it into an apartment with an elevator that opened beside the poetry shelves. She lived there for 19 months. After she died, I stayed. 5 years later, Daniel wanted to expand the events business and borrow against the property. Our lawyer, Leah Monroe, advised us to place the building and business leases into Lantern House Properties LLC. Daniel contributed cash and assumed more of the debt. He received 51% of the economic interest. I retained 49% and continued as a manager with him. Major decisions, including a sale of the building, required approval from both members. The operating agreement also gave me a 20-year occupancy right to the third-floor apartment in exchange for managing repairs and tenant relations. It was not charity, and it was not a favor from my son. Vanessa knew that. She had attended the signing. When I reached Lantern House after the funeral, a white cargo van was parked in the loading zone. Vanessa's brother, Curtis Vale, stood on the sidewalk with a roll of packing tape around his wrist. He was 50, broad through the shoulders, and wore dark glasses, though the sky was gray. 2 college-aged workers were carrying empty boxes through the side door. "They're not touching my apartment," I said. Curtis removed his glasses. "Vanessa said you agreed." She knew I did not. He looked uncomfortable, but not surprised. "Joe, she's trying to get through a closing. You can sort the rest out when the money lands." "What rest?" "Your share." "My share of a sale I did not approve?" One of the workers stopped with a flattened box in his hands. Curtis told both men to wait in the van. "There's a contract," he said after they left. "Blackridge put down serious money. If you blow this up, they'll sue the estate." Then the estate should show me the contract. Vanessa has enough on her plate. So did Daniel. He still found time to send an email saying there was no approval. Curtis's face changed. Only slightly, but enough. What email? The one you did not expect me to have. I walked to the side door. My brass key entered the lock but would not turn. A bright new cylinder had replaced the old one. Who authorized this? I asked. Safety issue, Curtis said. Too many people had keys after the funeral arrangements. I am a manager of the company that owns this door. Daniel was the majority owner. And Daniel is dead. That does not make you a locksmith. I took out my phone and photographed the lock, the van, the workers, and Curtis standing beneath the Lantern House sign. I did not hide what I was doing. This is why Vanessa says she can't deal with you, he said. You turn everything into evidence. Only things that may need remembering. Through the front windows, I could see boxes stacked near the register. A black trash bag lay beside them, and a sleeve of Eleanor's green winter coat extended from the opening. There are moments when anger feels almost clean. I wanted to break the window. I wanted to push past Curtis, climb the stairs, and throw every box back down. Instead, I called the non-emergency police number and said I was a co-owner and resident who had been locked out of both a business and my home. Curtis laughed once. You're calling the police on family after Daniel's funeral? No, I'm calling the police about a lock. The officer who arrived was younger than Grace's history teacher. He listened to both of us, looked at the operating agreement on my phone, and said he could not decide an ownership dispute on the sidewalk. He did, however, tell Curtis not to remove or dispose of my belongings and wrote an incident number on a card. He also asked whether I had somewhere safe to stay. I told him I did. That was only partly true. I had $300 in my wallet, a suit I no longer wanted to wear, and the key to a door that did not open. Ruth offered her guest room. I accepted because pride is a poor blanket and because I needed a table where I could lay out papers. Before leaving Lantern House, I stepped close to the front window. Eleanor's coat was still visible in the bag. I placed my hand against the glass. I'm coming back for it, I said. Curtis pretended not to hear. Ruth lived in a small cedar house outside town with 2 elderly beagles and a dining table permanently covered in tax folders. She made tomato soup and did not ask whether I wanted to discuss Daniel. At 8 that evening, after I had changed into a pair of her late husband's sweatpants, we opened the backup she had made of the March ledger. Lantern House had 3 sources of income: the bookstore lease, the second-floor events company, and a law office occupying 2 rooms at the rear. The LLC's monthly receipts averaged $18,700. After the mortgage, taxes, insurance, repairs, and reserves, it produced a modest but reliable surplus. The debt on the building was $294,000. Our most recent appraisal, completed 18 months earlier, valued it at $1,200,000. Selling for a fair price had never been unthinkable. Eleanor used to say, a building should serve the living, not trap them inside someone else's memory. What I opposed was Daniel's proposal to sell for $810,000 to Blackridge Development, a regional company buying old downtown properties for short-term rentals and boutique offices. After the mortgage, closing costs, and taxes, my 49% would have allowed me to buy a small condominium. Daniel believed the sale would relieve him of work he no longer enjoyed. I believed the price ignored the growth on our block and the value of the existing leases. We argued about numbers. That was normal. Then Vanessa entered the conversation. Her staging company, Northline Interiors, had expanded into 2 cities just as the housing market slowed. She leased warehouse space, financed furniture, and guaranteed a line of credit. She began telling Daniel that Lantern House was dead equity and that my occupancy prevented them from using what was theirs. Daniel defended me at first. Later, he asked whether I would consider moving if Blackridge increased its offer. I said I would consider any honest proposal. The ledger in front of Ruth and me suggested the proposal had stopped being honest. Northline Interiors had billed Lantern House $96,000 for vacancy preparation, relocation coordination, and historic fixture recovery. The invoice was dated 11 days before Daniel collapsed. No work had been performed. Lantern House had paid it from a $200,000 deposit wired by Blackridge into the LLC escrow account. Why would a buyer's deposit be released before closing? I asked. It shouldn't have been, Ruth said. I didn't release it. The wire was initiated through Daniel's management login with Vanessa's phone as the verification device. Daniel added her phone? 3 months ago, when he was traveling. The words struck me with a familiar sadness. Let me handle it. It was the sentence that had opened the door in so many families. Where did Northline send the money? I only know $41,000 went to its warehouse lender and $28,000 to a private loan company. The rest moved again. Did Daniel know? Ruth pointed to his email. Hold every Northline invoice and back up the March ledger. I think he found it that morning. I closed my eyes. Our last argument returned with cruel clarity. Daniel standing by the window, his coffee untouched, his face pale and exhausted. He had said, "Dad, there are things you don't understand about this deal." I assumed he meant I was old. Perhaps he had meant he was afraid. He tried to tell me, I said. Maybe, Ruth answered. Or maybe he had not decided what to tell you. Do not punish yourself with a sentence he never finished. At 9:20, Vanessa emailed me a notice titled, Termination of Gratuitous Occupancy. It stated that, as representative of Daniel's estate and successor majority owner of Lantern House Properties, she was revoking my permission to occupy the apartment. I had until noon the next day to schedule collection of medicine and necessary clothing. Everything else would remain for the buyer to inventory. Attached was a copy of the purchase agreement. The sale price was not $810,000, it was $740,000. The agreement required the building to be delivered vacant except for the law office tenant. The bookstore and events leases were to be terminated. The seller warranted that all members had approved the transaction. The closing date was 9 days away. The signature packet contained a written consent dated the previous Friday. Daniel's name appeared first. Mine appeared below it in a slanted imitation of the signature I used on Christmas cards. At the bottom, Vanessa had signed as witness. Ruth leaned closer to the screen. That is not your signature. No. And Daniel could not have signed Friday. I remembered that day in the intensive care unit. At 10 in the morning, a neurologist showed us images of Daniel's brain. At noon, Vanessa asked everyone to leave while she sat with him. At 4:14, according to the document, Daniel consented to sell Lantern House. At 4:14, a nurse had been adjusting the machine that breathed for him while I held his left foot beneath the blanket. Vanessa had been in the room. My phone rang. It was Grace. "Grandpa, Mom says you called the police and tried to have Uncle Curtis arrested." "No one was arrested. She says you're trying to take Dad's estate before he's even buried." I looked at the consent form on Ruth's laptop. Telling Grace about the signatures would have given me an ally and taken away her mother in the same conversation. "Your mother and I have a legal disagreement," I said. "You do not have to choose a side. She already chose one for me. She says I can't see you until the closing is done." My hand tightened around the phone. "I will not ask you to disobey her," I said. "That's not the same as saying she's right." "No, it isn't," Grace cried then, quietly. "Dad hated it when people answered a question he didn't ask. He got that from your grandmother." "Did he sign the building away?" I chose each word. "I have seen a paper that says he did. The date on it raises serious questions. Adults with the proper responsibilities will examine those questions. You should not have to investigate your father while you are grieving him. Mom says we're moving to Charlotte after the sale. What do you want?" "I want to finish school here. I want Dad to walk in and tell us everybody has lost their minds." There was nothing useful I could say to that. I listened until her breathing slowed. Before ending the call, she said, "He left his brown briefcase at the hospital. Mom brought it home, but now she can't find it. Do you know what was inside? Just work papers, I think, and Grandma's fountain pen. He carried it when he had to sign something important." Eleanor's pen was a black Waterman with a narrow gold band. Daniel had used it to sign the LLC agreement, the deed, and Grace's birth certificate. On the funeral consent, the electronic copy showed a thick blue line. It proved nothing by itself. But it was the first thing that did not fit. Leah Monroe answered her office phone at 7:30 the next morning. She had represented our family since before Daniel grew his first beard, but friendship had never made her casual. She told me to forward every document, photograph, email, and incident number. Then she asked one question. "Joe, are you certain you did not give anyone electronic authority to approve a sale for you?" "I am certain. Not a general consent, not a resolution, not a DocuSign proxy. No." "Good. Certainty is useful. Memory that improves after seeing a document is not." At 9, Ruth and I sat across from Leah in a conference room overlooking the courthouse lawn. She wore reading glasses on a red cord and had arranged the purchase agreement, operating agreement, occupancy provision, bank ledger, and Daniel's email in parallel rows. She did not call the consent a forgery. She called it disputed. She did not say Vanessa had stolen the deposit. She said funds appeared to have been disbursed outside the stated escrow purpose. Precision was not softness. It was how a fact survived contact with an accusation. Leah opened the operating agreement to a page I had signed 9 years earlier. Daniel's 51% was an economic interest and a membership interest while he was alive, she said. At death, his estate receives the economic interest and information rights under this agreement and state law. It does not automatically step into his management seat. Vanessa may control the estate after she qualifies as personal representative, but she does not become a member of Lantern House simply by writing "successor majority owner" in a notice, so she cannot sell the building. Not by herself. The company owns the building, not Daniel personally. Your agreement requires both members to approve a sale of substantially all assets. State law also treats a transfer of substantially all LLC assets as a member-level decision unless the agreement validly provides otherwise. After Daniel's death, we have a surviving member, an estate with economic rights, a succession clause, and a disputed contract. It is not simple, but it is not what her letter claims. What about my apartment? Leah slid the occupancy schedule toward me. This is not a revocable favor. It is a contractual right through September 2037, terminable for specific causes after notice and an opportunity to cure. Death of another member is not one of those causes. Even if you were only a residential tenant, a midnight email and a changed lock would not be a lawful eviction. Ruth exhaled. I had not realized she had been holding her breath. Can I go home? I asked. We will demand access this morning. If they refuse, we seek an emergency order. Do not break in. Do not confront Vanessa alone. Do not remove company records without logging them. And do not speak about this on social media. I don't use social media. Everyone says that until a church friend posts their version for them. She was right. By the time we left her office, a photograph from the funeral had appeared in a local community group. It showed Vanessa speaking to me near the casket. The caption read, "Please pray for the Mercer family." Daniel's father is struggling with confusion and anger and has challenged Vanessa's right to settle her husband's estate. Grace needs peace. There was no direct accusation. That made it effective. People supplied the rest themselves. Former students wrote that I had always been kind. Others said grief could make older people irrational. Someone who had bought a couch from Northline commented that a widow should not have to fight her father-in-law over her own husband's property. By noon, the story had acquired facts that never happened. I had shouted during the service, threatened Curtis, demanded Daniel's life insurance, and tried to take Grace away. I wanted to answer every lie. Leah told me to write one sentence and nothing more. There is a private dispute concerning the ownership and management of Lantern House, and I will address it through records and the proper legal process while our family grieves Daniel. I posted it on the bookstore page, then turned off my phone. At 11:20, Leah emailed Vanessa and the lawyer named on the purchase contract. She demanded immediate restoration of my access, preservation of all records, suspension of the closing, and return of any money disbursed from the Blackridge deposit. At 12:06, the lawyer replied that he represented only Daniel's estate in routine probate matters and had not prepared the property sale documents. At 12:19, Vanessa replied from her personal account. My father-in-law is emotionally unstable. His presence threatens the closing and my daughter's security. He voluntarily surrendered access after the funeral. The photograph of the changed lock carried a timestamp 43 minutes before the officer arrived. The officer's body camera would show me asking for entry and Curtis refusing it. Grief can blur memory. A timestamp is less easily persuaded. At 2, Grant Cole from Blackridge called Leah. She put him on speaker with my permission. We were told Mr. Mercer had agreed to relocate to a retirement community, he said. We have a signed member consent and a seller affidavit. You have a disputed consent dated while one signatory was medically incapacitated and the other was locked out, Leah replied. There was a silence. We were not aware of a medical issue on the execution date. You attended his funeral yesterday. I signed the condolence register. I did not know the exact hospitalization timeline. Now you do. Grant said Blackridge would pause physical activity at the property for 48 hours while its counsel reviewed the documents. He would not agree to cancel the closing or explain the deposit disbursement. Did your company authorize $96,000 to Northline Interiors? I asked. Leah gave me a look but allowed the question. Blackridge wired earnest money to an escrow account designated by the seller, Grant said. Any release would have required the conditions stated in the escrow instruction. What conditions? Executed consent, tenant certifications, and proof of a relocation agreement with the residential occupant. There was no relocation agreement. We received one bearing your initials. The room became very still. Send it, Leah said. It arrived 5 minutes later. The document stated that I accepted $75,000 in relocation compensation, waived my occupancy right, and would vacate before closing. My initials appeared on every page. The signature on the last page resembled mine more closely than the one on the member consent. Beneath it was a bank account at Blue Ridge Community Credit Union where the $75,000 had allegedly been sent. I had never held an account there. Ruth leaned over my shoulder. Northline Bank's there. The escrow release made sense now. On paper, $75,000 had paid me to leave. In reality, $96,000 had gone to Vanessa's company. $75,000 labeled relocation, $21,000 labeled preparation. Once I was physically gone and my belongings were boxed, Blackridge would see what it had been promised: a vacant apartment and no protesting resident. That is why she needed me out before the funeral ended, I said. Leah nodded. Vacancy was not just personal. It was a closing condition. The sentence hurt in a different place. Vanessa had not chosen the funeral because grief made her cruel. She had chosen it because witnesses would see me leave with a suitcase, and because she believed sorrow would make me too weak to ask what my departure was worth to her. We filed for emergency relief that afternoon. Legal work looks less dramatic than people imagine. There was no judge pounding a desk and declaring that truth had arrived. Leah drafted a verified complaint. I read each numbered paragraph. Ruth signed an affidavit concerning the ledger and Daniel's email. We attached the operating agreement, occupancy schedule, photographs, police incident card, purchase contract, disputed consent, and relocation document. A courier took paper copies to the clerk because the electronic system rejected one attachment twice. At 4:58, Leah corrected a date I had written incorrectly. At 5:12, she told me to go eat. I did not feel victorious. I felt like a father who had buried his son 28 hours earlier and was explaining to strangers why his daughter-in-law could not throw away his wife's coat. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing for the next morning. Until then, Blackridge agreed not to close or enter the property, but Vanessa still refused me access. Ruth drove me to a department store to buy socks, underwear, a toothbrush, and a blue shirt. At the register, the clerk asked if I was traveling. Something like that, I said. That night, I slept badly in Ruth's guest room. At 2:13, I woke from a dream in which Daniel was 10 years old and lost among the bookstore shelves. I could hear him calling, but every aisle ended at a locked door. I went to the kitchen. Ruth was already there drinking tea. Does everyone over 60 stop sleeping at the same time? I asked. Only people with receipts. She pushed a folder toward me. Inside were monthly Northline invoices going back 8 months. Most were small. Flower rentals, furniture storage, photography for events. 3 had round amounts just under $10,000. Daniel approved them through his login. Ruth had questioned one. He told her Vanessa was reimbursing the company for shared marketing expenses. Was she? I asked. Not that I can find. The total was $58,400, separate from the $96,000. Daniel knew about these. He approved them. I felt an immediate urge to decide what that meant. Had my son participated? Had he trusted his wife? Had he hidden her losses to protect Grace? Had Vanessa used his login without permission? Every answer led to a different man, and Daniel could no longer tell me which one was real. Do not make him innocent because he died, Ruth said softly. I looked at her. And do not make him guilty because you are angry he cannot explain. Follow each record as far as it goes. You should have been the teacher. I prefer numbers. They complain less. The emergency hearing lasted 43 minutes. Vanessa sat with the probate lawyer who had denied preparing the sale papers, and a litigation attorney Blackridge insisted she obtain. She wore a gray suit and kept one hand on a silver necklace containing a small photograph of Daniel. I wondered whether grief and deception could occupy the same hand. Of course they could. Human beings rarely wait to finish one emotion before beginning another. Leah did not ask the judge to decide ownership, fraud, or damages. She asked for narrow temporary orders. Restore my access, prohibit removal of property or records, suspend the sale, and require preservation of electronic data. Vanessa's attorney argued that I was a minority owner, interfering with the estate's urgent need for liquidity, and that my occupancy endangered a contract worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The judge read the operating agreement twice. Where is the instrument admitting the estate or Mrs. Mercer as a member? She asked. The attorney said it was implicit in Daniel's will and majority interest. Show me where this operating agreement makes it implicit. He could not. Then Leah showed the medical timeline. Daniel had been sedated before the time printed on his consent. My phone location history and 3 funeral planning receipts placed me at the hospital and church office on the day I supposedly signed from an address associated with Northline. Vanessa's attorney said electronic execution could have occurred earlier and been dated later. Then the original audit trail should clarify that, the judge said. Blackridge's counsel agreed to provide it. The judge restored my access by 5 that afternoon, prohibited any closing or disposal of property for 14 days, and ordered all parties to preserve phones, computers, cloud files, surveillance recordings, and bank records. She did not declare anyone dishonest. She said the submitted documents presented serious and irreparable questions. Outside the courtroom, Vanessa turned on me. "Are you proud of yourself?" Her voice broke on the final word. For the first time since Daniel died, I saw something unguarded in her face. "No," I said. "You froze the only money Grace and I have. The building is not the only money you have. Daniel had life insurance. You own your house. The house secures Northline's credit line. The insurance is $250,000, and Daniel guaranteed more than that." It was the first honest number she had given me. "How much?" I asked. "You don't get to audit my marriage. You billed my company $154,400. You made it my audit." She stepped closer. "Daniel agreed to keep Northline alive." "Then show me the agreement." "He was my husband. He was also my business partner. Those are not the same account." Tears rose in her eyes, but her voice became colder. "He spent his whole life trying to earn one sentence from you. Every repair, every event, every expansion. He was waiting for you to say he had made Lantern House better. You never did. Now you are using his death to take it back." The accusation landed because some part of it was true. I had praised Daniel often as a father, husband, and son. As a business partner, I corrected more than I thanked. I believed high standards showed respect. He may have experienced them as a locked door. "I cannot answer for every way I failed him," I said, "but I did not sign that consent." Vanessa wiped her cheek. "You always come back to paper. Because your version keeps changing." She walked away before I could ask about Grace. The new key to Lantern House was waiting at the police station, not with Vanessa. Her attorney had arranged it that way. An officer accompanied Ruth and me while we entered, photographed each floor, and confirmed that no one was present. The ground floor bookstore looked bruised. Half the new releases had been packed. The register drawers were open. Red stickers marked "Shelves Blackridge planned to preserve," blue stickers marked "Fixtures to remove," and yellow stickers marked "Items to evaluate." Eleanor's old reading chair had a yellow sticker on its back. On the second floor, framed photographs from weddings, school reunions, and author events were stacked face down. Daniel's office had been cleared except for a desk, 2 empty filing cabinets, and a pale rectangle on the wall where his college diploma had hung. My apartment was worse. Every drawer stood open. Clothes lay in boxes without labels. Family photographs had been separated from their frames. The kitchen cabinets were empty except for a jar of cinnamon and 3 chipped mugs. My medication sat in a clear plastic bag on the counter, as if prepared for pickup at a jail. Eleanor's green coat was no longer in the trash bag. It lay folded on the bed. For one foolish second, I thought Vanessa had remembered what it meant. Then I saw the yellow sticker attached to the sleeve. "Historic textile," it read. I sat on the edge of the bed. The officer asked whether I needed medical assistance. "No," I said. "I need that sticker removed." I peeled it off slowly. The adhesive pulled at the wool. Eleanor wore that coat every winter for 23 years. She wore it the evening Daniel proposed to Vanessa in the events room and the day Grace came home from the hospital. Blackridge had categorized it as a decorative object because no one involved had bothered to ask whose arms once filled it. Ruth stood in the doorway. "We can stop." "No." I opened every box and made an inventory. 2 watches were missing, along with my passport, Eleanor's jewelry case, the original occupancy agreement, and a fireproof document pouch. The brown briefcase Grace mentioned was not in Daniel's office or apartment. The company server had been removed from the locked cabinet downstairs. The officer added each item to his report. "Missing did not mean stolen," he reminded me. "They might have been moved for safekeeping." "Then whoever made them safe can say where," I answered. At 6, Vanessa emailed that personal valuables had been secured at her home and would be returned after I withdrew my claims. Leah responded within 4 minutes. "Retaining personal property as leverage is unacceptable. Return all listed items by noon tomorrow through counsel. Vanessa returned the watches, passport, jewelry case, and pouch. She said she had never seen Daniel's briefcase or the company server. The pouch contained the original occupancy schedule and 9 years of insurance policies. One policy was unfamiliar to me until I saw Daniel's signature. Lantern House Properties had purchased a $300,000 key-person life insurance policy on each of us when we refinanced the building 6 years earlier. The company paid the premiums. The purpose was to provide working capital and help fund the succession buyout if either member died. I remembered discussing it. I had forgotten the amount. Ruth checked the ledger. Premiums had been paid through the previous quarter. The next payment was due in 12 days. This does not fix the sale, I said. No, she replied, but it means the company is not dependent on Blackridge's money to survive Daniel's death. That was the first good news, and I distrusted it immediately. Good news arriving during grief can feel like an accusation. It asks you to consider a future when you are still bargaining with the past. I called the insurer. They confirmed the policy existed, the LLC was beneficiary, and a claim could be opened once we provided the death certificate and company authorization. As surviving manager, I could initiate it. Payment would require review. There would be no check by Friday, and no magical rescue before the next mortgage installment. Still, Vanessa's claim that immediate sale was the only way to protect Grace was no longer true. The following morning, Grant Cole met us at Lantern House with 2 Blackridge lawyers and a woman from corporate compliance. He looked around the half-packed bookstore as if seeing for the first time that a building contained more than rentable square feet. We relied on representations from the seller's transaction coordinator, he said. Who was that? Leah asked. Vanessa Mercer. She was not the company manager. We were told Daniel delegated authority to her during his hospitalization. He never regained consciousness after entering the hospital. Grant glanced at his lawyers. That was not disclosed. Ruth placed the relocation agreement on the table. Who supplied the bank instructions for Mr. Mercer's payment? Northline submitted them with a direction stating it was Mr. Mercer's relocation agent. Did anyone confirm that with Mr. Mercer? The compliance officer answered. The transaction file contains an email from his address. It was an address I recognized. Joseph Mercer Lantern at gmail.com. Mine was Joe Mercer Lantern at gmail.com. The false address had been created by inserting my full first name. The email said I had arthritis, found electronic signing difficult, and authorized Vanessa to coordinate everything. It ended with a sentence I would never have written. At my age, peace is more valuable than ownership. Is that not your belief? Grant asked carefully. Peace purchased by forging my name is only quiet for the buyer. The audit trail on the consent showed that both Daniel's and my signatures were placed from the same internet address at Northline's warehouse. Daniel's signature was applied at 4:14 p.m. on Friday. Mine followed 7 minutes later. The system sent verification codes to a phone ending in 8892. Vanessa's number ended in 8892. Blackridge suspended the contract and demanded return of the full $200,000 deposit. The escrow account held $104,000. The remaining $96,000 was gone. Grant did not apologize. Companies rarely apologize before their lawyers calculate the price of the word. He did say Blackridge would preserve its file and cooperate with lawful requests. Then he walked through the bookstore, removed one red sticker from a walnut shelf, and carried it out in his pocket. The sale did not vanish when Blackridge suspended it. It became a threat pointed in 2 directions. If the contract was invalid, Vanessa and perhaps Daniel's estate could face claims for the missing deposit and Blackridge's costs. If it was enforceable, I could lose my home and business. Either way, Grace's inheritance would be drawn into litigation. That afternoon, Vanessa filed a petition asking the court to dissolve Lantern House Properties. She alleged that Daniel's death left the company unable to operate, that I had blocked a necessary sale out of sentiment, and that continuing the business would waste the estate's economic interest. She asked for a receiver to take control of the building and complete a commercially reasonable sale. Attached was a declaration stating Daniel had approved the Blackridge transaction before his collapse and merely formalized it later through authority he had given Vanessa. She did not mention that the same phone signed for me. Can she do that? I asked Leah. The estate has standing to seek dissolution. Standing is not the same as winning. A judge can consider less drastic alternatives, including a buyout if the agreement provides one. It does, yes, and now we have to prove the company can perform it. The succession clause set the price at fair market value of the deceased member's economic interest, less company debt, adjusted for unauthorized distributions and insurance proceeds allocated to the buyout. The calculation would require an independent appraisal and accounting. The $300,000 policy would help, but Daniel's 51% could be worth much more. I may have to buy my son's share from his widow to keep the place we built together, I said. You are not buying your son, Leah replied. You are settling ownership after death. Do not let grief turn every number into a verdict on love. It was good legal advice and nearly impossible human advice. The next Sunday, I opened Lantern House for the first time since Daniel collapsed. I had planned to keep the doors closed another week, but the mortgage, employees, and tenants did not pause because our family was broken. Ruth put a small framed photograph of Daniel near the register. No candles, no donation jar, just his name and the years he had lived. People came all morning. Some bought books they did not need. Some hugged me. Some asked questions that were none of their business. One woman said she had read that Vanessa and Grace were about to be homeless because I had stolen the insurance money. Told her the company policy belonged to the company and that no claim had been paid. That is not what Vanessa said, she replied. Then Vanessa and I disagree. At noon, a delivery driver brought 20 boxes we had not ordered. Inside were copies of a self-help book called Letting Go Without Losing Yourself. Daniel had ordered them for an author event scheduled the week after his death. The invoice was paid. The author still planned to come if we wanted. I laughed for the first time in 11 days. It came out sounding like a cough. Ruth looked at the title. Subtle. Daniel never was. We held the event. 38 people attended. At the end, the author asked me what I was having trouble letting go of. The belief that if I understand every fact, I will understand my son, I said. She did not offer an answer. I respected her for that. After the crowd left, I found Grace sitting on the back stairs. She had entered through the law office so her mother would not see her car out front. I told you not to disobey her, I said. You said you wouldn't ask me to. You didn't say I had to obey. She sounded so much like Daniel that I had to look away. Your mother is afraid, I said. She is also lying. Both can be true. Grace handed me an envelope. Inside was a storage receipt from a 24-hour facility near Northline's warehouse. Unit 314 had been rented in Daniel's name the afternoon after his collapse. The payment card belonged to Vanessa. I found it in Mom's purse, Grace said. I handed it back. Then put it where you found it. The company server could be there. Dad's briefcase could be there. And if you took this without permission, your mother's lawyer will say I sent you to search her things. You didn't. That will not stop them saying it. Her face tightened. So we do nothing? No. You tell your mother you found it and ask why the unit is in your father's name. Or you give the information to an adult whose job allows them to investigate it. You do not become my investigator. Because I'm 17? Because you are Daniel's daughter before you are anyone's witness. Grace began to cry. Everybody keeps saying they're protecting me while they take away every choice I have. I sat beside her. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. What choice do you need today? I asked. I want to stay at my school. I want to work here on Saturdays like Dad promised. And I want someone to tell me whether he helped Mom do this. I can help with the first two. The third answer may take time, and it may not be clean. I don't need him clean. Neither do I. Grace returned the receipt to the envelope and left through the front door. She wanted her mother to know where she had been. That evening, Vanessa called me. Stay away from my daughter. She came to the store. You filled her head with accusations. I sent her home with the paper she brought. There was a pause. What paper? Ask her. Vanessa's breathing changed. If you move her before graduation to punish her for seeing me, I said, I will not fight you through her. But I will make sure she knows my door remains open. Your door is the problem. Daniel spent his whole life walking through it whenever you called. He owned half the building, 51%. Then why did you need my signature? She ended the call. The next morning, her attorney disclosed the storage unit through formal preservation correspondence. Vanessa claimed she rented it to secure company equipment and Daniel's papers after the hospital became crowded with visitors. She agreed to an inventory by a neutral forensic vendor. The company server was inside. So was Daniel's brown briefcase. And so were 14 pieces of furniture bearing Black Ridge inventory stickers, removed from Lantern House before any closing had occurred. The inventory took 6 hours. The forensic vendor photographed every item before touching it, assigned numbers to the server, briefcase, furniture, and 12 sealed cartons, then made us stand back while 2 technicians created an exact copy of the server drive. Vanessa attended with her attorney. She did not look at me until the lid of Daniel's briefcase was opened. Eleanor's fountain pen lay in the top compartment. Beside it were 3 yellow legal pads, the original Blackridge letter of intent, a printout of our operating agreement, and an envelope with my name written across it in Daniel's hand. I reached for the envelope. The technician placed his palm over it. "Everything gets logged first," he said. I stepped back. The envelope was not sealed. Inside was a copy of the appraisal and a handwritten column of numbers. At the bottom, Daniel had written, "Dad's floor, 1.05. Mine should be 2. It was not a farewell letter. It was not an apology prepared by a man who somehow knew he was about to die. It was a working note about the lowest price he believed we should accept for Lantern House, $1,050,000, nearly $300,000 more than the Blackridge contract Vanessa tried to close. Vanessa saw the number. That was before the roof estimate. Ruth looked at her. The roof estimate was $38,000, and the elevator, and the masonry, and the tenant concessions. Together, they do not explain a $310,000 reduction. Vanessa's attorney touched her arm. "Do not debate the accounting here." I kept my eyes on the papers. The first legal pad contained dates, calls, and short notes in Daniel's compressed handwriting. Most were ordinary. Grant. Revised tenant schedule. Dad. Roof numbers. Leah. Succession clause. Then, 9 days before his collapse, the notes changed. Ask V about escrow release. Why is Dad relocation 75 going to NLI? Device ending 8892 still on bank. Reverse before quarter close. The second pad contained a list of Northline payments. Daniel had circled 5 of them and written "approved temporary" beside 3. The total of those 3 was $27,600. He had drawn a line beneath the remaining $30,800 and written "did not approve." There it was. The answer Ruth had warned me not to invent. My son had helped his wife move company money into her business. Not all of it, not the $96,000 from Blackridge, but enough to know that a boundary had been crossed before he decided to step back over it. Vanessa spoke before I could. He knew Northline was borrowing from Lantern House. The operating agreement required both managers to approve related party loans, Ruth said. Daniel controlled 51%. He controlled 51% of the economics, I answered. He did not control 100% of the truth. Vanessa finally looked at me. "You think he wrote 3 words on a pad and became your innocent boy again?" "No." The answer surprised her. "I think he made decisions he should have told me about. I think he tried to correct some of them. I think he ran out of time. Those facts can stand beside each other." Her eyes dropped to the envelope. "He would have hated you reading this in front of strangers. Then he should have lived long enough to explain it himself." The cruelty of the sentence struck us both. Vanessa turned away. I gripped the back of a metal chair and waited until I trusted my voice again. The third pad was mostly blank. On the first page, Daniel had written a draft of what looked like a conversation. "Dad, I let this get farther than I told you. The original offer is not the deal on paper now. Vanessa says she can put the money back after the Charlotte project pays. I don't believe the timing anymore. I need you to be angry after you listen." The sentence ended there. I read it once, then again. "I need you to be angry after you listen." Daniel knew me well enough to anticipate the order of my emotions. He had feared that I would stop hearing him as soon as I understood the betrayal. Perhaps that was why he had not finished the conversation in my apartment. Perhaps my first accusation confirmed every reason he had waited. Leah asked the technician to bag each pad separately. Vanessa's attorney objected to treating Daniel's private notes as company records. The vendor recorded the objection and continued the inventory. The furniture told a smaller but useful story. 8 pieces belonged to Lantern House. 6 belonged to Northline and had been used at events under a rental arrangement. Blackridge's stickers had been applied by a junior property manager during a walkthrough 4 days before Daniel collapsed. The visit log listed Vanessa as seller representative. Neither Daniel nor I had attended. The server told a larger one. It took 4 days for the technicians to index the files and recover deleted material. During those 4 days, the judge extended the temporary order. Grace went back to school. I moved into my apartment again, though I slept on a mattress between boxes because putting the rooms back together felt too much like pretending nothing had happened. Every morning I carried 1 box downstairs and unpacked it at the long table near the history section. Customers began helping without being asked. A retired librarian shelved books. 2 former students rehung photographs. The law office tenant sent its receptionist upstairs with labels and a pot of coffee. I accepted the help, because refusing would have turned independence into another kind of vanity. On the fifth morning, Leah called me into Daniel's office. The server sat in its cabinet again, but the forensic copy remained with the vendor. Ruth had printed a timeline and taped it across the wall. The first event was 8 months earlier, when Daniel added Vanessa's phone as a secondary verification device on the Lantern House bank account. At that time, Northline was expanding into Charlotte, and Daniel traveled twice a week to help install inventory. Giving her access had been convenient and, under the bank's rules, permissible for a device used by an authorized manager. It did not make Vanessa a signer. 7 months earlier, the first Northline invoice appeared. Daniel approved it. Over the next 5 months, he approved 2 more. Together they totaled $27,600. No loan agreement existed. No interest was charged. Ruth had not been told they were loans. Daniel coded them as event development expenses. He concealed them, I said. Ruth did not soften the answer. Yes. 4 months earlier, Blackridge made an initial offer of $810,000. Daniel told Grant he was interested but needed my approval and a higher price. Grant increased the offer to $840,000 after reviewing the leases. Daniel saved the draft but did not forward it to me. 3 months earlier, Northline lost its largest Charlotte contract. The client disputed $213,000 in invoices and refused delivery of staged furniture. Northline's lender froze further draws and demanded a plan to reduce the balance. 2 months earlier, Vanessa began emailing Grant directly. She told him Daniel had authority to act for both members and that my occupancy was informal. She asked whether Blackridge would close faster if the price were reduced and the apartment delivered vacant. Grant replied that vacancy would improve the economics and avoid relocation risk. His first revised figure was $780,000. Vanessa countered at $740,000 if Blackridge funded $200,000 into escrow immediately and allowed seller-directed pre-closing work. Grant accepted, subject to signed company consent and proof of my relocation. He should have verified authority, I said. He should have, Leah answered. Carelessness is not the same as creating the false documents. We follow the evidence. 16 days before Daniel collapsed, Vanessa created the false email address in my name. The recovery address was hers. She used it to send Blackridge 3 messages about my supposed arthritis, retirement plans, and willingness to accept $75,000. 11 days before the collapse, she generated the $96,000 Northline invoice. 10 days before, someone uploaded my signature image from a Christmas letter stored on Daniel's server. 8 days before, Blackridge wired the deposit. 7 days before, Vanessa used her phone to enter Daniel's bank login and release $96,000 to Northline. 5 days before, Daniel returned from Charlotte and opened the ledger backup. His server activity showed that he reviewed the invoice, the escrow transfer, and the false relocation agreement. At 11:08 that night, he changed his bank password. At 11:16, Vanessa's phone successfully reset it through the recovery process. 4 days before, Daniel searched the operating agreement for the words removal of manager, unauthorized distribution, and indemnification. He also opened the key person insurance policy. The morning he collapsed, he emailed Ruth at 8:14. At 9:02, he saved a draft message to Leah. Leah, I need to report unauthorized activity involving the Blackridge deposit and Northline. Some earlier payments were made with my knowledge and without Dad's approval. I will provide the amounts. Please call me before contacting anyone. I need to secure the account first. At 9:19, Daniel printed the Blackridge file and our operating agreement. At 10:03, he called Vanessa for 6 minutes. At 10:26, he called Grant and left a voicemail. At 10:41, he opened a new email to me but never wrote a subject line. At 11:37, the emergency call was placed from Daniel's office. The consent forms were created 3 days later while he was unconscious. They were electronically signed the following Friday. The relocation agreement was backdated 2 weeks. I stood before the timeline until the ink blurred. Was the aneurysm caused by stress? I asked. Leah removed her glasses. Do not do that to yourself or to Vanessa. A cerebral aneurysm can rupture without warning. Nothing in these records establishes why it happened. He called her 90 minutes before he collapsed. Yes, that is a fact. The rest is grief, trying to prosecute a medical event. I hated the sentence. I also needed it. Ruth pointed to one gap in the timeline. The $28,000 Northline sent out after receiving the deposit did not all go to the private lender. $12,000 went to a checking account ending in 4,416. Whose account? We need the bank records. Vanessa's attorney produced them 2 days later rather than force another motion. The account belonged to Grace. It was a custodial savings account Daniel and Vanessa opened when she was born. Before the deposit transfer, it held $843. Vanessa moved $12,000 into it the day after Daniel collapsed. For several hours, I believed the ugliest interpretation. She had placed stolen money in her daughter's name to hide it. Then a second record arrived. The next morning, Vanessa moved the same $12,000 into a prepaid tuition plan for Grace's first semester at the University of North Carolina. She had stolen money to protect her daughter's education. The purpose did not clean the act. It did make the act more human, which was inconvenient. Anger prefers villains who never buy tuition. Grace learned about the transfer before I did. Vanessa told her during an argument, then blamed the court freeze for threatening college. My granddaughter came to Lantern House after closing time and placed her college folder on the counter. "I don't want it," she said. "The money? Any of it. Mom says she did everything for me. Some of what she did may have been for you. That does not mean you asked her to do it. If I use the tuition, does that make me part of it? No. But the money may have to be returned." She sat on the stool Daniel used when he repaired the register. "Then I won't go to college. That decision is larger than this week. Everybody says that when they want me to wait until I stop being angry. Sometimes waiting lets anger finish telling you what it knows." "What does yours know?" I looked around the store. Boxes still lined the wall. Daniel's photograph stood near the register. Eleanor's green coat hung over the back of a chair because I had not yet taken it upstairs. "Mine knows that your father lied to me about the first payments," I said. "It knows your mother forged my name and tried to remove me from my home. It also knows your father tried to stop the larger transfer, and your mother was terrified that you would lose everything. Anger does not get to erase the facts it dislikes." Grace pressed both palms to her eyes. "I wish you would just say she's terrible. Would it help?" "For 5 minutes. Then, for 5 minutes, you may be angry without making a permanent decision." She dropped her hands. "That is a teacher answer. I had 31 years of practice." The $12,000 was returned to the escrow account under a court-approved agreement. Grace signed nothing and was not named in the filing. I insisted on both points. Leah said the law already protected a minor from being treated as the architect of an adult transaction, but I wanted the record to say what the family had failed to say aloud. Grace was not collateral. The dissolution hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Before it, the court appointed a temporary financial monitor, not a receiver. The monitor could review every payment and approve transactions outside our ordinary expenses. I retained day-to-day management. Vanessa, as representative of Daniel's estate, received information rights but no authority to sign for Lantern House. The arrangement pleased no one. That was one reason I trusted it. An independent appraiser valued the building at $1,280,000. Blackridge objected that the estimate assumed continued operation and failed to account for urgent repairs. A second estimate placed necessary work at $71,000 over 2 years, not enough to explain the $740,000 price. The key person insurance claim was approved for $300,000. The money went into a restricted LLC account. I could not use it for personal expenses or hide it from the estate. Under the succession agreement, it was to be applied toward purchasing Daniel's economic interest if we completed the buyout calculation. For the first time, a path existed that did not require selling the building. Vanessa responded by giving an interview to a local lifestyle website. She did not accuse me by name. She described herself as a widow fighting an older generation's emotional control while trying to preserve her daughter's future. A photograph showed her sitting in Northline's warehouse beside an empty chair. The article said a family property had become the weapon of a grieving patriarch. My former student sent me the link 37 times. I said nothing. Silence is not always dignity. Sometimes silence merely leaves the liar with the microphone. But speaking before the records were complete would have forced Grace to watch her parents' worst decisions become public entertainment. I chose the court file over the comment section. The choice cost us business. 2 weddings canceled. An author postponed her launch. Someone taped a note to the bookstore door that read, "Let the widow live." Ruth peeled it off and placed it in the evidence folder. "Must everything become evidence?" I asked. "Only things that may need remembering," she said. She was using my own words. I decided not to object. The Financial Monitor's report arrived 9 days before the hearing. It confirmed the $154,400 in related party payments. It separated them into 3 groups: $27,600 Daniel had knowingly approved, $30,800 processed through his credentials without evidence of his approval, and $96,000 released from the Blackridge deposit after Vanessa reset his password. The report also found that Northline had provided $16,200 in legitimate services to Lantern House over 8 months: flowers, furniture rental, and photography, but had invoiced those items separately and been paid for them. They could not be used after the fact to justify the other transfers. Daniel was responsible for concealing $27,600 from me and misclassifying it in the ledger. Vanessa was responsible for much more. The report did not use the word responsible in a moral sense. It attributed transactions. That distinction did not spare either of them. At the dissolution hearing, the courtroom was nearly empty. Blackridge's lawyers sat in the rear because their company had filed a separate claim for return of the deposit. Vanessa sat across the aisle with 2 attorneys. Grace was at school. I had asked her not to come, and for once every adult agreed. Vanessa's lawyer argued that the LLC had become unworkable. Daniel's estate owned 51% of the economics. I controlled management. The parties did not trust each other, and litigation was consuming value. A receiver and sale, he said, would convert conflict into cash. Leah answered with operations. The mortgage was current. Tenants were paying. The insurance proceeds were restricted and available for the contractual buyout. An appraiser had valued the property. I had proposed a calculation and payment schedule. Dissolution, she said, would reward the very unauthorized transaction that created the alleged emergency. The judge asked whether I believed I could manage Lantern House at 74. It was a fair question. I did not treat it as an insult. Not forever, I said. I can manage it now. Ruth Alvarez handles the accounting and events. The bookstore has a manager. The law office maintains its lease. I have also begun interviewing a professional property manager. My plan is not to prove I never age. My plan is to keep one person's panic from deciding the future before the numbers are honest. And your relationship with the estate? The agreement provides a buyout. I intend to complete it. Even after learning your son authorized some of the transfers? I looked toward Vanessa. Especially after learning that. Daniel's estate should receive what his interest is honestly worth, adjusted by the agreement and the accounting. No more because he died, no less because I am disappointed. The judge denied immediate dissolution. She ordered the parties to finish the valuation process and attend mediation. The temporary monitor would remain for 60 days. If the buyout failed, the estate could return and seek further relief. Vanessa left without speaking to me. Outside, Grant Cole waited beneath the courthouse awning. Rain ran from the edge in a silver line. He handed Leah a settlement proposal. Blackridge would terminate the purchase contract, release any claim to Lantern House, and waive consequential damages if the missing $96,000 was restored within 90 days. It would absorb its inspection and legal costs. In exchange, all parties would release claims against Blackridge arising from its reliance on the false consents. Why now? I asked. Grant looked older than he had at the bookstore. Because our approval process failed. Because litigating against a dead man's estate and a 74-year-old resident is not the project we want attached to our name. And because the documents will not improve with discovery. Your company helped create the pressure for vacancy. Yes. It was the first unqualified answer he had given me. Will you put that in writing? The agreement says our file accepted occupancy representations without direct verification from you. That is not the same sentence. It is the sentence counsel approved. I almost smiled. Then we both still come back to paper. The mediation occurred at Leah's office on what would have been Daniel's 48th birthday. I noticed the date when I signed in. Vanessa noticed it too. Neither of us mentioned it. The mediator placed us in separate rooms. For 7 hours, numbers traveled down the hallway while the people connected to them remained apart. The appraised property value was $1,280,000. Debt and immediate transaction costs reduced the net value to $961,000. Daniel's 51% economic interest began at $490,110. The operating agreement allowed related party distributions attributable to a member to be charged against that member's buyout amount. The monitor attributed the entire $154,400 to Daniel's side because Northline was his spouse's company and because he had approved the first transfers or failed to prevent access that enabled the later ones. I objected. Leah looked at me as if I had misunderstood my own position. Daniel did not authorize the final $126,800, I said. Charging all of it against his estate makes Grace and the estate bear Vanessa's separate actions. The company has a contractual argument for doing exactly that, Leah said. Having an argument does not make it accurate. The mediator carried my objection to the other room. Vanessa's response returned 15 minutes later. She would accept responsibility for the $96,000 escrow transfer and the $30,800 unauthorized invoices. Those amounts would be satisfied first from liquidation of Northline assets and, if necessary, her separate share of Daniel's probate estate after exempt family protections. Only the $27,600 Daniel knowingly approved would reduce the LLC buyout. It was the first written admission she had made. The revised buyout amount for Daniel's interest was $462,510. The $300,000 insurance proceeds would be applied at closing. Lantern House would pay the remaining $162,510 to the estate over 5 years at a fixed rate, secured by the building but subordinate to the existing mortgage. Northline's inventory and receivables were expected to produce between $70,000 and $80,000. Vanessa would return the $12,000 already recovered from Grace's tuition account, which had been done. She would surrender a $26,000 cash value life insurance policy Daniel had assigned to secure Northline's line. She would sign a consent judgment for any remaining balance owed to Blackridge. The numbers were painful, but possible. Then the mediator brought the non-financial terms. Vanessa wanted me to agree that all contact with Grace would occur only with her permission until Grace turned 18. She wanted Daniel's photograph removed from the bookstore counter. She wanted me barred from speaking publicly about the transactions and required to refer to the signatures as disputed, even after settlement. I read the page twice. No, I said. Leah asked which part. All of it. A confidentiality clause could protect Grace. A clause about private financial terms can protect Grace. A clause that lets Vanessa control whether her daughter sees her grandfather protects Vanessa. Grace is still a minor, and I will respect lawful parental decisions. I will not sign away a relationship as currency. Daniel's photograph stays unless Grace asks me to move it, and I will not call a forged signature disputed after the person who made it admits what she did. Leah carried the answer down the hall. An hour passed. The office became quiet enough that I could hear the old elevator cables in the neighboring building. At 6:30, Vanessa entered our room without the mediator. Her attorney followed, then stopped at the door. Vanessa placed Daniel's silver necklace on the conference table. The tiny photograph inside showed him holding Grace as a newborn. "Do you know what he said after she was born?" she asked. "Many things. He said he would never make her audition for love," I remembered. Eleanor had asked whether being a father frightened him. Daniel said he was afraid of repeating every silence in our family. Then he held Grace against his chest and promised she would never have to perform for affection. "He was 29, I said. "He kept trying to earn yours. This negotiation is not the place to make Daniel 12 years old again. You think paper keeps you from doing that? No, I think paper keeps either of us from rewriting him entirely." She sat across from me. Without the practiced posture and careful makeup, she looked exhausted. "I forged the signatures," she said. Her attorney stepped forward. "Vanessa, they already know." She did not look away from me. "Daniel agreed to the first payments. He agreed we should sell. He told Grant we could get you to move if the price was right. Then he found out I had changed the terms and released the deposit. He said he was going to tell you and Leah. I asked for 48 hours to replace the money. He said I had used all my 48 hours. I heard my son's voice in the sentence. "What happened during your call that morning?" I asked. He told me the bank access was canceled. He said he had printed everything. I told him if Northline failed, we would lose the house, my company, Grace's tuition, and every dollar he had put in. He said losing money was not the same as losing everything. I said that was easy for a mercer to say because Lantern House would always catch him. Her hands tightened around each other. Then he said he was going downstairs to tell you. Daniel had not reached the elevator. Ruth found him beside the history table. Vanessa began to cry. It was not graceful. Her shoulders folded, and for several seconds no words came. When the doctor said he would not wake up, I knew the only way to replace the money was to close. Grant needed the consent. I had your signature from the Christmas letter. Daniel's electronic signature was in the account. I told myself he had wanted to sell, so I was only finishing the decision. I told myself you would get $75,000 and a condominium. I told myself so many things that by the funeral they sounded like facts. Why order me out beside his casket? She closed her eyes. The relocation payment required possession before closing. Grant's property manager was coming that evening. If you walked out with a suitcase in front of witnesses, I could say the agreement had been performed. The confession did not feel like victory. It felt like hearing the mechanism inside a trap after it had already closed. You put Eleanor's coat in a trash bag. Curtis did. I told him to clear the apartment. And then you labeled it a historic textile. Blackridge did. Every person did one small thing, and somehow I was no longer living there. Vanessa wiped her face. I am not asking you to forgive me. Good, she flinched. Forgiveness offered inside a settlement is another kind of payment, I said. I will not buy it from you, and you cannot demand it from me. Then what do you want? I thought of the funeral, the changed lock, the fake email, and the bags stacked around my bed. I thought of Daniel's $27,600 and the unfinished sentence on his legal pad. I thought of Grace asking whether using tuition made her part of a lie. I want the building transaction unwound, I said. I want the money accounted for. I want Grace kept outside the releases, testimony, and public statements. I want you to stop using Daniel's death to give yourself authority he did not have. And I want you to tell Grace the truth before someone else teaches it to her as gossip. If I tell her everything, she may never speak to me again. That is not a reason to make her love a version of you that does not exist. Vanessa looked toward the door. And after that? After that, consequences belong to the people whose jobs are to decide them. Our family will have to live without controlling the verdict. She withdrew the contact restriction, accepted a narrower confidentiality term protecting Grace's financial and school information, and agreed that neither of us would make false public statements about the other. Daniel's photograph remained in the bookstore. The signatures were identified in the settlement as unauthorized and placed by Vanessa. We signed at 8:14 in the evening. The exact time Daniel had emailed Ruth on the morning he collapsed, I noticed. I did not call it a sign. Dates have enough work to do without carrying messages from the dead. The settlement did not end the matter. Blackridge still had to approve it. The probate court had to confirm the estate transaction. The insurer had to release the restricted funds. Northline's lenders had claims. And the district attorney had received the forensic report because the court monitor could not ignore evidence of false documents and diverted escrow money. Quiet justice is rarely one clean door closing. It is a hallway of doors, each opening on a different schedule. Northline shut down 6 weeks later. Its warehouse furniture was sold at auction. The sale produced $73,400 after secured costs. Daniel's cash value policy added $26,000. With Grace's returned $12,000, the available restitution exceeded the amount Blackridge demanded. The balance after fees went toward Northline's remaining lender. Blackridge terminated the contract and recorded a release of every claim against Lantern House. The company did not buy the building. It did not receive our shelves, Eleanor's chair, or the apartment key. The probate judge approved the buyout after reviewing the appraisal and monitor's report. Daniel's estate received the $300,000 insurance proceeds and a secured note for the balance. Vanessa remained the primary beneficiary of the estate, subject to creditors and a trust Daniel's will had already created for Grace. She did not become a member or manager of Lantern House. I became the sole member, but I did not become the sole author of its history. That distinction mattered. The criminal case took longer. Vanessa was charged with obtaining property by false pretenses and uttering a forged instrument. I learned about the charges from Leah, not from a reporter. The prosecutor asked whether I wanted to submit a statement. Will my statement decide whether she is charged? I asked. No, the state has already made that decision. Will it decide her sentence? It may inform it. I wrote 3 pages, then tore them up. I wrote 1 page and kept it. I did not ask for prison. I did not ask for mercy. I described being told to leave beside my son's casket, finding my name on a relocation agreement, and returning to an apartment where my wife's coat had been labeled inventory. I also stated that Vanessa had repaid the diverted funds, admitted responsibility, and was the only living parent of a grieving 17-year-old. I ended with 1 sentence. Accountability should protect the truth, without requiring another child to lose a parent. Vanessa entered a guilty plea to 1 felony count under an agreement that dismissed the second charge. The judge imposed a suspended sentence, 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution for investigation costs not covered by the civil settlement. She was prohibited from serving as a fiduciary or handling client escrow funds during probation. The conviction ended her professional certification with the Staging Association and made rebuilding Northline under another name impossible. Some people in town said she had escaped punishment. Others said I had destroyed a widow over paperwork. Both groups wanted a simple ending they could repeat over lunch. Vanessa lost her company, her house, after the lender enforced its security, her reputation, and the version of Daniel's death in which she had done nothing but protect her daughter. She moved into a 2-bedroom rental near Grace's school and took a salaried job managing displays for a regional furniture store. She also remained Grace's mother. Punishment and life continued in the same body. Grace did not speak to her for 12 days after the confession. During that time, she stayed with Vanessa's sister under an arrangement everyone approved. She did not move into Lantern House. I did not petition for custody. I saw her twice, both times in Leah's conference room with a family counselor present because Grace had asked for a place where neither side could leave when the conversation became difficult. At the first meeting, she asked me why I had not told her sooner about Daniel's payments. Because I wanted to be certain, I said, or because you wanted Dad to look better? Both. She nodded slowly. Thank you for not making the second one sound nicer. At the second meeting, she asked Vanessa why she had used the tuition account. Vanessa answered without looking at me. Because I wanted one part of the money to become something no one could take from you. But it wasn't yours, no. Dad knew about the other money? Some of it. Did he know you forged Grandpa's name? No. Did he want Grandpa out? Vanessa took a long breath. He wanted him to consider moving if there was a fair sale and a good place to go. He did not agree to force him out. He was angry when he saw the fake relocation agreement. Grace cried then. So did Vanessa. I did not move closer. That grief belonged first to them. When the counselor asked whether I wanted to add anything, I said, "Your father loved both of you. He also hid money from me and delayed telling the truth. Love does not make those choices disappear. Those choices do not prove the love was false." Grace looked at me. Is that what you believe about Mom too? It was the kind of question teenagers ask when they have already removed every safe answer. I believe your mother loves you, I said. I believe she used that love to excuse things that harmed you and other people. What she does next will tell us whether love becomes responsibility. Vanessa covered her mouth with one hand. Grace returned home with her 3 days later. I saw my granddaughter on Saturdays. At first, Vanessa brought her and waited in the car. Later, she came inside for coffee and sat at the far end of the store. We spoke only about pickup times, school forms, and whether Grace had eaten. Boundaries are not dramatic enough for a YouTube headline. They are more useful than dramatic promises. The first payment on Daniel's estate note was due 6 months after the buyout. Lantern House could make it only if we replaced the canceled events and controlled repairs. Ruth and I hired a professional manager named Malik Green, a former hotel operations director who was 43 and unimpressed by family mythology. On his first day, he asked why the second-floor storage room held 6 different styles of banquet chair. History, I said. History is costing you $220 a month per square foot of usable storage. We sold 4 styles. I disliked him for an afternoon and trusted him by Friday. Malik negotiated a new 5-year lease with the law office, rebuilt the events calendar, and required 2 approvals for every related party payment. Ruth reduced her hours but retained monthly oversight. I remained involved in tenant relations and the bookstore. For the first time since Daniel joined the business, I wrote a succession plan that did not assume love would substitute for procedure. Grace worked at the register on Saturdays as her father had promised. She was not given a management title or special access. She earned the same hourly wage as the other student clerk and complained about the same closing checklist. In April, she received an academic scholarship large enough to cover most of her first year at Greensboro. The remaining cost came from Daniel's trust after the probate court approved it. No diverted money followed her to campus. On the day the scholarship letter arrived, she ran up the bookstore steps and handed it to me without speaking. I read it twice, though the first time had been enough. Your father would have printed 10 copies, I said. Mom printed 12. We laughed, then stopped at the same moment. It's okay, Grace said. We're allowed. She framed one copy beside Daniel's photograph. The anniversary of his death approached more quietly than the funeral had. I began waking at 2:13 again. Sometimes I walked downstairs and sat in the history aisle where Ruth found him. Grief did not become smaller. It became less surprised by its own weight. One night, I opened the last carton from the storage unit. The forensic vendor had returned it months earlier, but I had avoided it because the label said Daniel, personal office. Inside were tax files, old keys, 3 baseball caps, and a stack of high school essays I had graded in red ink. Daniel had kept them for 30 years. The top essay was about Lantern House before we restored it. He was 17 when he wrote it. I had given him a B+ and written, "Strong images, but you mistake nostalgia for an argument. What should this building become, and who gets to decide?" Beneath my comment, in newer ink, Daniel had written, "Still working on it." I sat on the floor until dawn. For months, I had imagined our last unfinished conversation as a courtroom where one of us had to be right. Daniel's note changed nothing about the money. It did not absolve him. It did not condemn me. It reminded me that our argument had begun long before Blackridge and would have continued if he had lived. Fathers and sons can love each other across a question they never solve. On the first anniversary, we held no memorial service. Grace asked to open the second-floor events room to anyone who wanted to share a story about Daniel. Malik limited attendance to the fire code. Ruth made coffee. Vanessa brought a tray of sandwiches and asked where to put it. "The back table," I said. It was the first time she had entered Lantern House since the mediation. She looked toward the elevator. "May I go upstairs?" My body remembered the funeral before my mind answered. I saw the blue folder, the packed suitcase, and Eleanor's coat extending from a trash bag. Why? I found something that belongs there. She opened her purse and removed my old brass apartment key. Curtis had kept it after changing the lock. Vanessa found it while emptying Northline's office. The key no longer opened the new cylinder. It had no practical value. I held out my hand. She placed it in my palm. "You may come up after the gathering," I said. "Grace comes with us." She nodded. 43 people told stories that afternoon. A former employee remembered Daniel carrying boxes in a snowstorm. A bride remembered him finding a backup cake after hers collapsed. Grant Cole sent a letter describing Daniel as the only seller who had corrected Blackridge's measurement of the alley because he refused to profit from 6 feet that did not belong to him. Ruth read one sentence from his 814 email, but omitted the financial details. Grace told everyone her father sang badly and without shame. I spoke last. "Daniel helped save this building," I said. "He also wanted to sell it. He made choices here that hurt people, and he tried to correct some of them. Today is not improved by making him flawless. He was my son. That is more durable than flawless." After the room emptied, Grace, Vanessa, and I took the elevator upstairs. My apartment looked like a home again. Eleanor's photographs were back in their frames. Her green coat hung beside the door. Daniel's high school essay lay on the desk under glass. Vanessa stopped when she saw it. "He showed me that once," she said. "He said the red comment was the first time you treated him like an adult. I thought he hated it. He did. Both can be true." The words had become a family inheritance. Grace opened the balcony door. Evening light settled across Main Street, and the copper lantern above the store came on automatically. For years, Daniel had complained that the timer ran 4 minutes slow. I had never fixed it. That night, it illuminated the sidewalk exactly as the courthouse clock struck 7. Vanessa looked at the old key in my hand. "I cannot undo what I did." "No, I am sorry." I believed she was. Believing an apology does not require returning the key to the person who changed the lock. "I hear you," I said. It was not forgiveness. It was not refusal. It was the truth available that day. She left with Grace 20 minutes later. At the door, my granddaughter hugged me and asked whether I would drive down for family weekend in October. "If invited," I said. "You're invited." After they left, I carried Daniel's photograph downstairs. For a year, it had stood near the register where everyone could see it. I moved it to the history table, beside a small card Grace had written. He helped build what came next. The following morning, a young couple came to ask about renting the second floor for their wedding. They had heard there had been trouble with the building and wanted to know whether it might be sold. "Not today," I said. The man laughed. "That sounds temporary." "Everything is temporary. A reliable contract simply tells us what to do while it lasts." They booked a date in June. Before opening the store, I went upstairs and placed the old brass key in a wooden box with Eleanor's fountain pen and Daniel's unfinished legal pad. I did not keep them as weapons or proof. The copies needed for the case were already where they belonged. I kept them because objects can hold the shape of a lesson after anger releases it. At my son's funeral, Vanessa believed that if she could make me stop crying, carry a suitcase, and surrender a key, the building would become hers to sell and the story would become hers to tell. She was wrong about the building. For a while, I was more afraid she might be right about the story. But a family story is not saved by making one person innocent and another monstrous. It is saved by refusing to let love erase evidence, and refusing to let evidence erase every trace of love. I still live above Lantern House. The mortgage is current. Daniel's estate note is paid every month. Ruth checks the books. Malik makes me justify every unnecessary chair. Grace calls on Sundays and works during school breaks. Vanessa and I are not friends, and perhaps we never will be. We are two people who loved the same man, failed him in different ways, and now share the obligation not to make his daughter pay for those failures. Eleanor's green coat remains beside my door. I wear it sometimes when I take the trash out on cold mornings, though the sleeves are short and the buttons close on the wrong side. The first time Grace saw me in it, she laughed so hard she had to sit on the stairs. That laughter did not betray Daniel. Neither did rebuilding. The old key no longer opens anything. I keep it anyway. Not because I want the lock back, but because it reminds me of the day I learned the difference between being allowed into a home and having the right to stand in it. And no one has asked me to pack my bags again.